The snow tastes like iron and ash. Lyra doesn't know if it's from the blood seeping through her torn shoes or the smoke that always lingers over the silver moon-packed territory. She doesn't care anymore. Behind her, the torches of her father's compound fade into the darkness. Ahead, the trees of the forbidden forest rise like the ribcage of some ancient, sleeping god. The wooden sign, weathered, claw-marked, unmistakable, looms before her. Do not enter. Death awaits. Good, she thinks, and keeps walking. Her 18th birthday was supposed to change everything. She was supposed to feel the mate bond, that sacred connection the elders whispered about. Instead, she felt her father's hand shoving her toward a scarred, leering alpha who smelled of whiskey and violence. She'll do, the stranger had said, looking at her the way one examines livestock. She'll serve you well, Alpha Cade replied, pocketing the blood money. Lyra's feet crunch through the snow. Each step takes her deeper into the forest where even the bravest warriors refuse to go. The stories say the trees themselves are hungry, that the Alpha King who rules here is more monster than man, collecting the bones of trespassers to build his throne. She hopes those stories are true. She hopes it's quick. The cold is a knife now, cutting through her thin cloak. Her legs give out. She collapses into the snow, and it receives her like an old friend. Above, through the skeletal branches, she can see stars, more stars than she's ever seen through the smoke of home. I'm ready, she whispers to whatever is listening. Just make it quick. She closes her eyes and waits for the claws. What she feels instead is warmth. A heavy fur cloak, still carrying body heat, settles over her trembling frame. Her eyes snap open to find a figure kneeling in the snow beside her. A man, impossibly large, with midnight hair that falls to his shoulders and eyes that glow like molten gold in the darkness. He's beautiful, terrifying, ancient. You took long enough, he says, and his voice is like thunder rolling through mountains, but it trembles, breaks, as if he's the one who's been wounded. I have felt your pain through the bond for years. I finally found you. Lyra flinches, instinctively raising her arms to protect her face from the blow. She's learned always comes next. The man freezes. His jaw tightens. Something in those golden eyes splinters, and for a moment, the most feared creature in all the territories looks like his heart is breaking. No one will ever make you do that again, King Vorian whispers, and when he reaches for her this time, his massive hands are gentle as he lifts her from the snow. You're safe now. You're home. Lyra woke to softness, and that was her first warning that something was wrong. Her entire life, she'd slept on stone floors or thin pallets that reeked of mildew. The silver moon pack didn't waste comfort on runts. But this, whatever she was lying on, cradled her body like water, warm and yielding. Furs surrounded her, thick enough to drown in, and they smelled of pine and something wild she couldn't name. Her eyes snapped open to wood. Not the rotting planks of the kennels where she'd been kept, but living wood, massive beams that curved overhead like ribs, bark still intact, with green moss growing in the seams. Pale morning light filtered through gaps that seemed deliberately shaped, casting patterns across walls that weren't walls at all, but the interior of something ancient and impossibly vast. She was inside a tree large enough to hold rooms. Panic clawed up her throat. She tried to sit up and gasped as pain lanced through her feet, the feet she'd walked bloody through the forest, the feet that should have carried her to death. Instead, they'd carried her to him. The memory crashed back, golden eyes in the darkness, a voice like thunder saying, I finally found you, strong arms lifting her as though she weighed nothing. The Alpha King. Vorian. The monster from every nightmare whispered around fires, the creature who supposedly decorated his throne with the skulls of trespassers. He'd covered her with his cloak and called her safe. Lyra's fingers clutched the furs, searching for the trap. Kind words were always traps. Her father had taught her that. He'd smile before he struck, praise her before he sold her. Cruelty disguised as mercy hurt worse because you stupidly let yourself hope. She forced herself upright, biting back a whimper as her ravaged feet touched smooth wooden floorboards. Someone had cleaned her wounds, bandaged them with strips of soft cloth that smelled of herbs. There were clothes folded on a chair beside the bed, real clothes, not rags. A simple dress in deep forest green, clean and whole. The door opened. Lyra's body reacted before her mind could catch up. She dropped to her knees, head bowed, arms wrapped over her skull, the position that sometimes made the beatings shorter. Her heart hammered against her ribs so hard she thought they might crack. "Easy." The voice was female, low and careful. "Nobody's going to hurt you here." Lyra didn't move. The promise meant nothing. Everyone hurt her eventually. "My name is Sage," the woman continued. Footsteps approached, deliberate and slow. "I'm the fortress healer. I treated your feet last night. They'll be tender for a few days, but they'll heal clean." When Lyra still didn't respond, the woman, Sage, sighed softly and set something down with a gentle thunk. "I've brought you breakfast. The king requests your presence when you're ready, but there's no rush. Take your time." The footsteps retreated. The door closed with a quiet click. Lyra waited, counting her breaths the way she'd learned to do when locked in dark spaces. When she reached 100 and nothing terrible happened, she finally lifted her head. A tray sat on the small table near the window. Steam rose from a bowl, carrying scents that made her stomach clench with desperate hunger. Bread. Real bread, not moldy scraps. Something that looked like porridge with honey drizzled over it. Sliced fruit, apples, she thought, though she'd only seen apples from a distance, never tasted one. And meat, God's actual meat, cooked and seasoned. It was a test. It had to be. They'd poison her or snatch it away the moment she reached for it, laughing at her presumption. But her body didn't care about tests or traps. Lyra crawled to the table, too afraid to stand, and pulled herself up to reach the tray. Her hands shook as she grabbed the bread, tearing off a piece and shoving it into her mouth. The taste exploded across her tongue, butter and salt and warmth. She sobbed around the mouthful, stuffing more in, her manners forgotten. There had never been room for manners when you never knew when you'd eat again. She was cramming the apple slices into her dress pockets when the door opened again. This time, the figure filling the doorway was massive. Not Vorian, but someone nearly as large, a man with silver-threaded black hair and a face ravaged by old scars. 3 claw marks raked from his forehead across his nose to his jaw, leaving his left eye milky white. His good eye, dark as pitch, took in the scene. Lyra on the floor, pockets bulging with stolen fruit, honey smeared across her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words automatic. I'm sorry, I'll put it back." "Why would you put it back?" The scarred man stepped inside, and despite his size, his movements were careful, controlled. "It's yours." "I shouldn't have. I didn't ask." "You're the king's mate. Everything in this fortress is yours." He lowered himself to sit on the floor, several feet away from her, making himself less threatening. "I'm Thorn, second in command, and before you apologize again, let me save us both time. You've done nothing wrong." Lyra clutched the bread to her chest, unable to process his words. The king's mate, as if that meant something good, as if she wasn't just a different kind of prisoner in a different kind of cell. Thorn's scarred face softened slightly. "I know that look. I wore it for 5 years after I escaped my old pack. My alpha enjoyed breaking bones and watching them heal wrong." He gestured to his ruined eye. "This one never did heal right, but Vorian found me bleeding out in these woods, same as you. That was 40 years ago. I'm still here because I choose to be, not because I'm forced." 40 years, Lyra's voice came out hoarse. "The forest has a way of keeping its own." Thorn's good eye held steady on hers. "You're safe here, really safe. But I know you won't believe that until you've tested it 1,000 times. So test it. Hoard food, lock doors, keep your back to walls. Do whatever you need to do to feel like you can breathe. Nobody here will judge you for it." The casual understanding in his voice cracked something in Lyra's chest. She looked down at the bread in her hands, at the crumbs scattered across her borrowed dress. "The king wants to see me." "When you're ready, he's waited 18 years. He can wait another hour." Thorn rose smoothly to his feet. "The washroom is through that door. Take your time. And Lyra," he paused at the threshold, "the fruit in your pockets, take more if you want. The kitchens are always full. That's not going to change." After he left, Lyra sat in silence, staring at the half-eaten breakfast. Slowly, carefully, she pulled an apple slice from her pocket and took a bite. It was sweet, crisp, real. She ate 3 more pieces before she could make herself stop and save the rest. Just in case Thorn was wrong. Just in case this was all a dream and she'd wake up back in the kennels, starving. But the wooden walls remained solid. The furs stayed soft. And somewhere in this impossible fortress built into living trees, an alpha king was waiting, the monster who'd felt her pain for 18 years and called it his own. Lyra stood on trembling legs and limped toward the washroom, still clutching an apple slice in her fist like a talisman. She didn't believe in safety, but maybe, just maybe, she could learn. Vorian was waiting in what Thorn had called the king's study, though it looked nothing like the cold stone chambers Lyra associated with power. This room grew from the tree itself, the desk carved from a natural burl, shelves sprouting from the walls like branches, windows that were gaps in the living wood rather than cuts. Books lined every surface, their spines worn with use. He stood when she entered, and Lyra's breath caught. In the darkness of the forest, he'd been terrifying. In daylight, he was devastating, tall enough that she'd have to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, with shoulders that could carry the world. His hair fell loose around his face, black as midnight, and those golden eyes tracked her movement with an intensity that made her want to run. She didn't. Running only made predators chase. "Sit, please." He gestured to a chair near the window, upholstered in soft leather. When she remained frozen by the door, he added quietly, "I'm not going to come near you unless you ask me to." Lyra studied his face for the lie, found only patience and something that looked almost like pain. She sat, perched really, ready to bolt, hands gripping the armrests. Vorian moved to the window, putting distance between them, giving her space to breathe. "Thorn said you have questions. I'd rather you ask them than let them fester into fears." "Why?" The word escaped before Lyra could stop it. "Why wait for me? Why not just—" She couldn't finish. "Why not just take what you want like everyone else?" "Because the mate bond isn't ownership." Vorian's voice was low, careful. "It's a bridge between souls. It can be beautiful, the most profound connection 2 wolves can share, or it can be a chain if one side forces it." He turned to face her, backlit by the window. "I felt the bond snap into place the moment you were born. 18 years ago, I woke from sleep with this certainty burning in my chest. She exists, she's here, find her. So I did." Lyra's fingers dug into the leather. "You found me. You watched me." "Yes." No hesitation, no excuse. "A seer came to me 3 days after you were born. She told me what you were, a moonweaver, the last of a murdered bloodline. She told me where you were. And she told me that if I claimed you before you came to me by choice, before you were strong enough to bear the bond's full weight, the power would consume you from the inside. You'd burn out like a candle in a windstorm. So you left me there." The accusation tasted like ash. "You left me with him." Vorian's jaw tightened. "I made a choice between your temporary suffering and your permanent death. I have questioned that choice every single day for 18 years. He moved closer, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Stopped when Lyra tensed. "The bond works both ways, Lyra. I felt everything. Every beating. Every night you cried. Every moment you wanted to die. It nearly drove me mad." "Then why?" "Because the seer was right." His voice cracked. "You needed to choose. Not me, not fate, not desperation, you. The mate bond can only complete when both souls reach for each other freely. And you couldn't reach for anything when you were broken. So I waited. I felt your pain and I waited and I hated myself for it." Lyra stared at him, this ancient powerful king, and saw the truth carved into his face like Thorn's scars. He'd been trapped too, just in a different kind of cage. "What happens now?" she whispered. "Now you heal. You learn what it means to be safe. And when you're ready, if you're ever ready, you can decide whether you want the bond completed." Vorian's golden eyes held hers. "Or you can reject it, reject me. I'll survive it and I'll still protect you. This doesn't have to be a cage, Lyra. It can just be a choice you're finally allowed to make." The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and terrifying. No one had ever given her a choice before. "Can I see it?" The question surprised her as much as him. The forest, You said it was dangerous, but Thorn said that it's only dangerous to those who bring harm. Vorian's expression gentled. Come, let me show you what those legends got wrong. They descended through the fortress on stairs that spiraled down the massive tree's interior. Lyra couldn't stop staring. Wolves moved through the corridors, some in human form, others as beasts, nodding respectfully to Vorian but not approaching her. They gave her space, though their eyes weren't cold. Just careful, like she was something precious that might shatter. The forest floor was nothing like the frozen wasteland she'd stumbled through. Here, deeper in the territory, life thrived. Massive trees stretched toward a canopy so thick it created a permanent twilight, but bioluminescent moss painted the trunks in shades of blue and green. Streams cut through the undergrowth, their water crystal clear. And everywhere, there were wolves. A group of juveniles tumbled past, playing some complex game involving a leather ball. An elderly woman sat weaving baskets from reeds, humming under her breath. Two massive males sparred in a clearing, their movements precise and controlled, while others watched and called advice. These are the monsters, Lyra breathed. These are the rejected. Vorian walked beside her, close enough to catch her if she stumbled but not touching. That woman weaving. Her pack tried to drown her when she gave birth to stillborn pups 3 times. They said she was cursed. The males sparring, one is deaf, the other was born without his wolf form. Their birth packs called them defective. The children playing were all taken from abusive homes. Lyra watched a small girl, maybe 6 years old, race past, laughing. She had burn scars covering half her face, but her smile was genuine, untainted by fear. The forest protects those who need protection, Vorian continued. The trees themselves are ancient, aware in ways we don't fully understand. They can sense intent, cruelty, fear. When someone enters these woods fleeing abuse, the forest guides them here. But when someone enters hunting, seeking to harm, he gestured to a tree whose trunk was blackened and twisted. The forest fights back. I thought I'd die here. Lyra's voice was small. You would have if you'd come seeking death out of cruelty to yourself. But you came seeking escape from cruelty. The forest knew the difference. He paused beneath a massive oak, its branches spreading like protective arms. This place is a sanctuary, Lyra. For the broken, the different, the ones the world threw away. You're not a prisoner here, you're home. Home, the word was foreign, sharp-edged. Lyra had never had a home, only places she was forced to stay. A wolf pup bounded up to them, tiny, fluffy, with oversized paws, and dropped a pinecone at Lyra's feet. It yipped excitedly, tail wagging. She wants you to throw it, Vorian said, and something in his voice was almost amused. Lyra looked down at the pup, then at the pinecone. Slowly, she bent and picked it up. The pup vibrated with anticipation. She threw it. Not far, her arm was weak from years of poor nutrition, but far enough. The pup exploded after it, tumbling over her own feet in excitement, then raced back and dropped it again. Something unfamiliar bloomed in Lyra's chest. Light, warm, fragile as spider silk but real. She threw the pinecone again. The pup retrieved it. Again. Lyra was smiling. Actually smiling, and she didn't know how to stop. When she finally looked up, Vorian was watching her with an expression so raw it should have frightened her. Instead, it made that warmth in her chest grow. This is real, she asked, needing to hear it again. This is real, he promised, and so is your choice, always. The pup dropped the pinecone and flopped across Lyra's feet, panting happily. Around them, the forest hummed with life, with wolves who'd been broken and chose to heal, who'd been rejected and chose to stay. For the first time since she'd entered these woods wanting to die, Lyra wondered what it might feel like to live. Lyra was learning the names of trees when the screaming started. She'd been walking with Sage through the outer gardens, trying to memorize the difference between oak and ash, when a wolf's howl of agony split the afternoon. Not the hunting calls she'd grown accustomed to, or the playful yips of pups. This was pain, raw and desperate. Sage's face went pale. Stay here. But Lyra's feet were already moving, drawn by something she couldn't name. She followed the healer through the undergrowth, toward where wolves were gathering in a tight circle. They parted for Sage, and Lyra glimpsed what lay in the center. A wolf, gray and matted with blood, barely breathing. The scent hit her like a fist, silver moon pack. Home. No, not home. Prison. Thorn was already there, kneeling beside the messenger. As Lyra watched, the wolf's form rippled and shifted, bones cracking, until a young man lay gasping in the dirt. He couldn't have been more than 20. Deep gashes crossed his torso, and one leg bent at an angle that made Lyra's stomach turn. "Get him to the healing rooms," Sage ordered, but the messenger's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Message," blood flecked his lips, "for the king from Alpha Cade." Vorian materialized from the crowd, his presence commanding instant silence. He crouched beside the wounded wolf, and his voice when he spoke was gentle despite the fury Lyra could see building behind his eyes. "I'm listening." "He says," the messenger coughed, crimson staining his teeth. "He says you have stolen property, his daughter. He wants her returned by the new moon or he starts killing hostages. 3 families, 15 wolves. He's locked them in the old granary with silver chains." Lyra's world tilted. 15 wolves. People she'd grown up with, probably. The weak ones, the ones Cade considered expendable, just like he'd considered her expendable. "He did this to you." Vorian's question was soft, dangerous. "To make sure you believed him." The messenger's laugh was wet, broken. "I'm his nephew. He said if family means so little to him, you'd know he meant what he promised." Sage barked orders and wolves rushed forward with a stretcher. As they carried the messenger away, Lyra felt every eye turn toward her. The weight of their stares pressed down like physical hands. "No," Vorian's voice cut through the murmurs before they could start. "Whatever you're thinking, no." But Lyra was already stepping forward. "I'll go back." The words came out steady, certain. This was familiar territory. Her pain in exchange for others' safety. It was the only mathematics she'd ever understood. "Lyra," Vorian started, but she cut him off. 15 people, 3 families, he'll kill them. Her voice didn't shake. She'd learned long ago how to swallow fear until it sat heavy in her belly, invisible to the world. "If I go back, he'll let them go." "He'll kill them anyway." Thorn's scarred face was grim. "That's what men like Cade do, take everything and give nothing." "You don't know that." "I do." Vorian moved toward her, slow and deliberate. The crowd melted back, giving them space. "I know men like your father. They don't honor bargains. He'll take you and keep the hostages, use them as leverage to make you compliant. Or he'll kill them in front of you as a lesson. Or he'll release them only to hunt them down one by one for sport." Lyra's hands clenched into fists. "So what? We just let them die." "We save them." Vorian's golden eyes blazed. "But not by sacrificing you." "Why?" The question exploded out of her, sharp with frustration she'd been holding back for days. "Why do I matter more than 15 other people? I'm nobody. I'm worthless." "Stop!" The command in Vorian's voice froze her mid-sentence. "Don't you dare use his words. Don't you dare measure your value by the lies of a man who never deserved you." "But they'll die. And that will be on him, not you." Vorian closed the distance between them, and for the first time since that night in the forest, he reached out and gripped her shoulders. His touch was firm but careful, giving her room to pull away if she needed. She didn't. "Listen to me, Lyra. You are not responsible for your father's cruelty. You are not a bargaining chip. You are not property to be returned." "I'm one person," she whispered. "They're 15. "You are my mate." His voice dropped, rough with emotion. "You are a moonweaver, the last of your line. You are a girl who survived 18 years of hell and still had the strength to walk into these woods. You are worth everything, and I will burn the world down before I let him have you back." Tears blurred Lyra's vision. She wanted to believe him. Gods, she wanted to believe that she mattered, that her life had value beyond what she could endure. But the faces of those hostages haunted her. She'd known hunger, chains, fear. She couldn't sentence others to the same. "There has to be another way," she said. "There is." Vorian released her shoulders and turned to address the gathered wolves. "We go to war. Thorn, send runners to every pack within 3 days' travel. Tell them Alpha Kate of Silver Moon has violated the sanctuary accord by threatening refugees under our protection. Any who stand with us will have the forest's favor. Any who stand with him will face the forest's wrath. The crowd erupted in motion. Wolves shifted and raced off in different directions. Thorn began barking orders about weapons, supplies, defensive positions. Lyra stood frozen in the chaos, watching Vorian transform from the careful, patient man who'd given her space into something else entirely. A king, a warrior, someone who commanded armies with a few words. He caught her staring, and his expression softened fractionally. "We'll leave at dawn, strike before the new moon, get the hostages out first, then deal with Cade. And if it's a trap..." "It's definitely a trap." A grim smile touched his lips. "But he's made a critical mistake. He thinks I'm like other alphas, that I'll negotiate, posture, play political games. He doesn't understand what I am." "What are you?" Vorian's eyes flashed gold, and for a moment, Lyra saw the monster from the legends. Not cruel, but absolutely merciless. "I'm the thing that protects the desperate from the cruel, and I'm very, very good at it." He strode away to join Thorn, immediately immersed in tactical discussions. Lyra watched him point to a map someone had spread across a fallen log, his hands moving with decisive precision. Every wolf that approached him received orders and dispersed immediately. But she noticed what the others didn't. The tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he thought no one was looking, the minute tremor in his fingers when he touched the map near where Silver Moon territory was marked. He was terrified, not of the fight, of losing, of failing to save those hostages, of what it might do to her if people died because of her. Sage appeared at Lyra's elbow, her healer's bag already packed. "He'll get them out," she said quietly. "I've seen him pull off impossible rescues before. He doesn't lose people, not if he can help it." "And if he can't help it?" Sage's expression was grave. "Then we'll all share that weight together. That's what pack means." Pack, another word Lyra didn't fully understand. At Silver Moon, pack had meant a hierarchy of suffering, everyone scrambling to avoid being at the bottom where she'd lived. Here, it seemed to mean something else entirely. A young wolf approached with a leather bundle, bowing slightly. "The king requests you wear this tomorrow, for protection." Lyra unwrapped it to find armor, light leather reinforced with some kind of metal that shimmered in the fading light. Made for her size, her frame. "I'm not a fighter," she said. "No," Sage agreed. "But you're about to ride into battle anyway. Vorian won't leave you here unguarded, and he won't leave you in the fortress where Cade might send a strike team. So you'll stay close to him, and you'll wear armor, and you'll learn very quickly what it means to be a queen." Queen, the word was as foreign as home had been. Lyra clutched the armor and watched Vorian directing his wolves with the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Watched him hide his fear behind duty. And she wondered if this was what love looked like, someone willing to go to war rather than let you sacrifice yourself, someone who saw your value even when you couldn't. It terrified her more than anything her father had ever done. The training yard was a clearing where ancient trees formed natural barriers, their roots creating uneven terrain that Thorn said would teach her balance. Lyra stood in the center at dawn, wearing clothes that actually fit and boots that didn't leak, holding a practice staff that felt impossibly heavy in her hands. "You're gripping it like it's going to fly away," Thorn observed. He moved around her in a slow circle, his scarred face impassive. "Relax. The weapon is an extension of your arm, not a snake trying to bite you." Lyra forced her white-knuckled fingers to loosen. Everything in her body screamed to stay small, stay meek, don't draw attention. Learning to fight felt like painting a target on her back. "I can hear you thinking." Thorn stopped in front of her. "You're wondering why you need this. You're thinking if you just stay quiet and invisible, maybe the violence will pass you by." She flinched at the accuracy. "How'd that work for you before?" His tone wasn't cruel, just matter of fact. "Violence doesn't avoid the meek, Lyra. It seeks them out. Predators hunt the weakest prey." The words triggered something, a memory rising like bile. She was 9, maybe 10. She tried to make herself invisible in the corner of the packed dining hall, but her father had spotted her anyway, his boots crossing the floor, the casual backhand that split her lip. This is what happens when you forget your place. Her place had been beneath notice, beneath contempt, beneath mercy. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Yes, you do. Thorne stepped closer. You know how to survive. Fighting is just survival with purpose. Now, stance. He demonstrated, feet shoulder-width apart, knees slightly bent, weight balanced. Your body is already trying to tell you what to do. Feel where you're stable. Lyra mimicked his position. Her legs trembled from more than exertion. Good, now hold the staff horizontal. He adjusted her grip with surprising gentleness for such scarred hands. When someone swings at you, you're going to bring this up to block, like this. He moved in slow motion, demonstrating the defensive arc. She copied him. The staff wobbled. Again. She did it again, and again. Her arms started burning after the 20th repetition, muscles screaming their weakness. Years of inadequate food had left her body a fragile thing, prone to exhaustion. Thorne, I can't. You can rest when you're dead. He raised his own staff. Block. He swung, controlled, and telegraphed. Lyra brought her staff up too slowly. The impact jarred through her arms and she stumbled backward, landing hard on her tailbone. The pain was nothing compared to the shame. She was pathetic, useless, everything her father had always said she was. Get up. Another memory, 13 years old, carrying water buckets that were too heavy. She tripped on the uneven kennel floor, spilling half the contents. Her father's second-in-command had beaten her with a rod until she couldn't stand, then kicked her when she fell. Get up! Weaklings don't deserve rest. She'd gotten up. She always got up, because staying down meant worse. Lyra, Thorne's voice cut through the spiral. Where are you? She blinked, finding herself still on the ground, arms wrapped around her knees. Thorne crouched a few feet away, giving her space. In the past, she managed. Come back to the present. You're safe here. The worst thing that happens in my training yard is bruises and exhaustion. He paused. And before you say it, no, I'm not going to hurt you for being slow or weak or scared. You're learning. Learning requires failure. The concept was so foreign she couldn't process it. Failure had always meant punishment. Thorne seemed to read her confusion. My old alpha used to break my fingers when I dropped my sword during training. Every time. By the time I was 15, my hands were so mangled I could barely hold a weapon. He flexed his scarred fingers. Vorian spent 3 years retraining me. Not just the fighting, the flinching, the expectation of pain. He never once raised his voice, even when I made the same mistake 100 times. Why? The question was barely audible. Because he understands what we survived, and he knows broken things need patience to heal, not more breaking. Thorne extended a hand. Now get up, not because I'm forcing you, but because you're choosing to. Lyra stared at his palm. Rough, scarred, steady. She placed her hand in his and let him pull her to her feet. They trained until mid-morning. Block, strike, footwork, balance. Lyra fell 6 more times. Each time, Thorne waited patiently for her to rise, never touching her without permission, never showing frustration. You're thinking too much, he said during a water break. Your body knows how to react. Your mind is getting in the way. My body knows how to cower. Your body knows how to survive impossible odds. That's different. He demonstrated a defensive sequence. Try this. Don't think, just move. She tried, failed, tried again. On the 3rd attempt, something clicked. Thorne swung and her staff came up to meet it, not perfectly, but fast enough. The impact sang through the wood, but she held her ground. Again, he said, and there was approval in his voice. They moved faster. Block, counter-strike, pivot. Lyra's breath came hard, but her body was finding its rhythm. When Thorne feinted left, she didn't fall for it, reading his weight distribution. His staff came at her ribs. She blocked and twisted, using his momentum against him the way he'd shown her. The end of her staff caught him in the solar plexus, gentle, controlled, but a hit. Thorne stepped back, nodding. There it is. Lyra stared at her staff, then at Thorn's surprised expression, and something burst free in her chest. Laughter. Real laughter, not the bitter mockery she'd learned to hide behind. This was light and genuine and shocked her so much she clapped a hand over her mouth. But it kept coming. She'd hit him. She'd actually defended herself and landed a strike. Weeks ago, she'd been walking into the forest to die, and now she was standing in a training yard laughing after winning a point against a warrior. "Don't stop on my account," Thorn said, and he was almost smiling. "That sound is victory." From the edge of the clearing came a low rumble, not quite a growl, but close. Lyra turned to find Vorian standing in the shadows of an oak, and the expression on his face stopped her breath. He wasn't looking at Thorn or the training setup. He was staring at her with such raw, complex emotion she couldn't name it all. Pride, yes. Relief. But underneath, threading through everything else, was rage. Not at her, never at her. At what had been done to her. At a world that had made her believe she couldn't laugh, couldn't fight, couldn't be anything but a victim. Their eyes met across the distance. Vorian's glowed molten gold in the dappled light. "Beautiful," he said quietly, and she knew he didn't mean her appearance. He meant the laughter, the defiance, the way she'd chosen to stand up and try again. Thorn glanced between them and cleared his throat. "I think that's enough for today. Rest, eat, and we'll go again tomorrow, same time." As Lyra walked toward the fortress, legs shaking with exhaustion, she felt Vorian fall into step beside her. He didn't touch her, didn't speak, just walked with her like a silent guardian. "I hit him," she said, wonder in her voice. "You did. You'll hit harder tomorrow." There was satisfaction in his tone. "By the time we face Cade, you'll be strong enough to stand at my side, not behind me, beside me." The distinction felt monumental. That night, when Lyra examined her bruises in the mirror, she saw something different than the marks her father used to leave. These were proof she'd fought, proof she'd tried, proof she was learning to be something other than prey. She pressed her fingers to the darkening spots on her forearms and smiled. The moon rose like a silver coin through the canopy, and Lyra's skin began to burn. She stood in a clearing Vorian had brought her to, far enough from the fortress that she wouldn't feel watched, close enough that help could come if needed. Not that help would matter. You couldn't save someone from their own inadequacy. "It's going to hurt," Sage had warned her that morning, pressing a bundle of soft clothes into her hands. "First shifts always do, but you're stronger than you think." Lyra wasn't strong. 18 years without shifting had left her wolf dormant, stunted. Her father had taken perverse pleasure in that detail. "Even your wolf knows you're worthless," he'd say, watching the other young wolves shift with ease while Lyra remained stubbornly human. Now the moon's pull was undeniable, dragging something wild and desperate to the surface. Her bones felt wrong, like they were trying to reshape themselves from the inside out. "Breathe." Vorian's voice came from somewhere to her left. He'd given her space, disappeared into the shadows to shift privately. Respectful even now. "Don't fight it, let your wolf come." Let it come to what? To prove she was broken, that even her most basic nature had been twisted beyond function. The pain spiked. Lyra gasped and dropped to her knees as her spine arched involuntarily. This was worse than any beating, worse than hunger or cold. This was her body tearing itself apart and rebuilding wrong. A whimper escaped her throat, human sound from a human mouth that was already changing. Then she heard it, a howl deep and resonant cutting through her panic. Not commanding, not impatient, just there, steady as stone. Vorian's wolf calling to hers. Something in Lyra's chest answered. The shift took her like a wave. Bones cracked and reformed. Muscles tore and reknit. Her vision blurred, then sharpened into something crystalline and strange. Scents exploded across her consciousness, earth and moss and living wood, and underneath it all, something dark and wild that made her newly formed hackles rise. When it finished, Lyra opened eyes that saw the world in silver and shadow. She was small. Gods, she was tiny, barely larger than the pups that tumbled through the fortress. Shame crashed through her even as she stood on 4 trembling legs. Of course her wolf would be as pathetic as the rest of her. Movement in the shadows. Something massive emerged from between the trees, and Lyra's wolf instincts screamed predator, alpha, danger. She backed up, ears flattening. Vorian's wolf was a nightmare-given form, easily twice her size, maybe more, with midnight black fur and eyes that burned gold even in wolf form. Ancient power radiated from him. He should have been in the legends where he belonged, not standing 3 feet away from her pitiful excuse for a wolf. He lowered his head, not in dominance, in invitation. A soft chuff escaped him, almost questioning. His tail gave a single, tentative wag. Lyra's wolf tilted its head, uncertain. The human part of her was still screaming about inadequacy and shame, but her wolf felt something else entirely. She took a step forward. Her legs were steadier than she'd expected, moving with an instinctive grace she'd never possessed as a human. Another step. Vorian remained perfectly still, letting her approach. When she was close enough, he lowered himself completely to the ground, making himself smaller, less threatening. The king of the forbidden forest, prostrating himself before a wolf the size of a large dog. Something fierce and bright ignited in Lyra's chest. Her wolf surged forward, pressing her muzzle against his in greeting. His scent wrapped around her, pine and smoke, and something wild that made her want to run, to hunt, to live. Vorian rose smoothly and turned, glancing back at her over his shoulder. An invitation. His tail swayed once before he took off into the forest. Lyra's wolf didn't hesitate. She ran. And gods, she was fast. What she lacked in size she made up for in speed, her smaller frame darting between trees that Vorian had to navigate around. The forest blurred past in streams of silver and shadow. Her paws barely touched the ground before she was pushing off again, muscles burning in the best possible way. Vorian kept pace beside her, massive and powerful, but he wasn't leading. Every time she changed direction, drawn by scent or sound or simple instinct, he followed. When she leaped a fallen log, he was there to catch her if she stumbled. When she skidded to a halt at a stream, he waited while she drank. Her wolf had never felt powerful before, had never felt like anything but a broken promise. But now, running through moonlit woods with a king at her flank, she felt invincible. The rabbit broke from cover without warning. Lyra's wolf reacted on pure instinct, the chase igniting every predatory nerve in her body. She was on it before conscious thought caught up, jaws closing around its neck with efficient precision. The kill was clean, quick, her first. Vorian's wolf approached slowly, his eyes bright with something that looked almost like pride. He nosed at her catch, then at her, a rumbling approval vibrating through his massive chest. They shared the meal in companionable silence, her small wolf pressed against his larger one for warmth. The human horror Lyra expected never came. This was natural, right. Her wolf understood what her human mind struggled with, that survival required strength, and strength sometimes wore fangs. They ran until the moon began its descent, until Lyra's wolf felt pleasantly exhausted rather than afraid. When dawn started painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, Vorian led her back to the clearing. The shift back was easier. Still painful, but her body remembered now, knew the path. When Lyra opened human eyes, she was lying in soft grass, wearing the clothes Sage had given her. And she was pressed against Vorian's chest. He'd shifted close enough to catch her when the transformation left her weak, one arm curved protectively around her shoulders. His other hand held the cloak he'd draped over both of them for warmth. His chest rose and fell beneath her cheek, his heartbeat steady and strong. She should pull away, should put distance between them. But she was so tired, and he was so warm, and for the first time in her life her wolf felt satisfied. "Your wolf is beautiful," Vorian murmured into her hair. "Fast as lightning, silver as moonlight, perfect." "Small," she countered, but there was less shame in it than there should have been. Speed over size, intelligence over brute force. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to refuse, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Do you know what silver fur means? What it marks you as?" She shook her head against his chest. "Moonweaver, your bloodline could speak to the moon herself, could pull power from her light. That's why Cade kept you weak. He was terrified of what you'd become. His fingers traced along her jaw, featherlight. He was right to be. Lyra lifted her head to look at him. His golden eyes were molten in the dawn light, searching her face like she held answers to questions he'd been asking for 18 years. "I'm not afraid," she whispered, and meant it. For the first time, looking at him didn't trigger the urge to flee or freeze. "Of me," his voice was rough, careful, "or of this?" "Either, both." She reached up tentatively, touching the corner of his jaw where dark stubble shadowed his skin. "I should be, shouldn't I? You're dangerous." "To everyone but you." He turned his head slightly, pressing into her touch like a wolf seeking affection. "I would burn the world for you, Lyra, but I would never burn you." The words settled into her bones like truth. She'd spent 18 years learning to recognize lies, the false promises, the manipulation disguised as kindness. This wasn't that. This was raw and real and terrifying in its honesty. She leaned closer, watched his eyes darken, watched him hold himself perfectly still as she erased the distance between them, giving her control, letting her choose. When she kissed him, it was tentative as a question, soft and uncertain and asking permission with every movement. Vorian's response was careful reverence. His hand cupped the back of her head, supporting her, his lips moving against hers with devastating gentleness. No demand, no taking, just offering, waiting for her to take what she wanted. She wanted more. Lyra's fingers slid into his hair and she kissed him deeper, tasting pine and smoke and something wild. His arms tightened around her, careful, always careful, but she felt the tremor in his muscles, the restraint it cost him to remain gentle. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vorian pressed his forehead against hers. "I've waited 18 years for that," he said roughly. "I'd wait 18 more if you needed me to." Lyra's laugh was breathless, disbelieving. "I don't think I want to wait anymore." His smile was sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Then we won't." The seer arrived with the fog, materializing from the mist like something conjured rather than real. Lyra was in the healing gardens with Sage, learning which herbs could draw poison and which could ease pain, when the ancient woman simply appeared at the garden's edge. She was impossibly old, skin like crumpled parchment, white hair falling past her waist in a single thick braid. But her eyes were ageless, pupils so dark they seemed to swallow light. Those eyes found Lyra immediately, and the weight of that gaze made her stumble backward into a planter box. "Finally," the seer said, her voice like wind through empty rooms. "The lost daughter remembers how to stand." Sage straightened, recognition and wariness crossing her face. "Elder Mora, we weren't expecting you." "The moon doesn't announce itself. It simply rises." The old woman moved forward with surprising grace, leaning heavily on a staff carved from white wood. She stopped 3 feet from Lyra and tilted her head, studying her the way one might examine a particularly complex puzzle. "You have your mother's eyes, your father's stubborn jaw, and absolutely no idea what you are." Lyra's throat closed. "My father." "Alpha Cade is not your father." Moira's words were flat, factual, destroying Lyra's world with the same inflection one might use to comment on weather. "He murdered your parents when you were 3 days old and claimed you as his own. A runt orphan no one would question. The perfect hiding place for a bloodline he wanted extinct." The garden tilted. Lyra's knees gave out and she sat down hard on the stone path. Not his daughter, not his blood. The man who'd beaten her, starved her, sold her, stolen her from people who might have loved her. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Because your bloodline terrified him. Terrifies all the old alphas who remember what Moonweavers could do." Moira lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the path with Lyra, joints creaking. "Your mother was Celeste of the Silver Thread line. Your father was Marcus, a warrior poet who could kill with a blade or a verse. They were bonded mates, powerful and deeply in love. When you were born under a full moon with silver in your fur, the old prophecies stirred." Sage had gone pale. "The Moonweaver prophecy, I thought it was legend." "All legends start as truth." Moira's gnarled fingers traced patterns in the air, and Lyra could have sworn she saw silver light following the movement. Moonweavers were the moon's chosen, wolves who could see the threads that bind souls together, who could heal or sever mate bonds, who could call power directly from lunar light. They kept the balance, prevented forced bonds, protected the rejected, stopped alphas from becoming tyrants. So they killed them, Lyra whispered. Killed them all. The Alpha Council did 70 years ago, declared Moonweavers too dangerous, too powerful to be allowed to exist, hunted them systematically. Moira's eyes were ancient sorrow. Your parents went into hiding when your mother became pregnant. They thought they'd been careful enough. They were wrong. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Cade's constant surveillance, his obsession with keeping her weak, powerless, isolated. He hadn't just been cruel, he'd been strategic, keeping a Moonweaver suppressed under his control until he could figure out how to use her power for himself. He knows what I am, Lyra said. He suspects. The seer who told him about your birth and your bond with Vorian also warned him what you might become. Moira reached out slowly, giving Lyra time to refuse, and touched her forehead with one crooked finger. But suspicion and certainty are different things. He's kept you too broken to access your gifts. Until now. Heat bloomed where Moira's finger pressed against Lyra's skin. Not painful, but intense, like the moment before lightning strikes. The garden around them began to change, or rather, Lyra's perception of it did. Threads appeared in her vision. Thousands of them, silver and gold and every color in between, connecting everything. A delicate web wove through the fortress, linking wolf to wolf in varying degrees of brightness. Some threads were thick as rope, thorn to Vorian, bonds of loyalty and brotherhood. Others were gossamer thin, casual friendships, temporary alliances. And then she saw the mate bonds. They burned, pure light connecting souls, so bright they hurt to look at. A golden thread linked two wolves training in a distant courtyard, new mates, their bond still raw and overwhelming. A silver cord connected an elderly couple sitting by the fountain, their bond worn smooth and comfortable as old leather. And stretching between her chest and somewhere deeper in the fortress, a bridge of light so brilliant it made the others look like candle flames. White gold, pulsing with each heartbeat, alive and growing stronger. Her bond with Vorian. Lyra gasped and the vision overwhelmed her. She saw every connection in the fortress, felt the weight of them pressing against her consciousness. Too much, too bright. She was drowning in other people's emotions, their loves and loyalties and heartbreaks bleeding into her own. Breathe, Moira's voice was an anchor. You're not them, you're you. Their bonds don't define you, you witness them. Observe, don't absorb. Slowly, carefully, Lyra pulled herself back. The threads remained visible, but the crushing weight eased. She could see without being consumed. Good, Moira said, approval in her tone. You learn quickly, like your mother. Lyra looked down at her own hands and saw faint silver light dancing across her palms. Power. Real power, not the broken thing she'd always believed herself to be. Why now? She asked. Why can I suddenly do this? Because you finally have a reason to live instead of merely survive. Because you chose to walk into these woods seeking freedom. Because you've begun to heal. Moira's weathered face softened. And because your mate bond is completing. Vorian's presence is drawing out your dormant gifts. Love is awakening what fear suppressed. The white gold thread between her and Vorian pulsed as if in response to its name. Lyra studied it, not a chain like she'd feared, but a bridge. Two distinct souls choosing to build a path between them. She could see where it connected to her chest, how it hummed with potential but didn't constrain. She could walk away from it if she chose. It would hurt, probably kill him, but the bond wouldn't stop her. That's what made it beautiful, the choice to stay. Cade wants this, Lyra said slowly, understanding crystallizing. He wants to force a bond with me, use my power to control other bonds, create an army of forced mates who can't refuse him. Now you see. Moira stood with effort, and Sage rushed to help her. He's been searching for a Moonweaver for decades. When his seer told him you existed, told him you'd eventually bond with the Alpha King, he saw an opportunity. Take you back before the bond completes, break you thoroughly, and use you as a weapon. Rage burned through Lyra's veins, hot and righteous. Not just for herself, For every wolf Cade had hurt, every bond he'd tried to twist, every life he'd destroyed in his quest for power. "I won't let him." The words came out steady, certain. "No," Moira agreed. "You won't. But child, listen carefully. Power without love destroys. I've seen moonweavers drunk on their own abilities, severing bonds for sport, playing God with people's hearts. They became monsters worse than any alpha." She gripped Lyra's chin, forcing eye contact. "But love without power cannot protect. Your mother loved your father desperately, but when Cade's wolves came, love alone couldn't save them." The warning settled heavy in Lyra's chest. Two edges of the same blade, power and love, each dangerous without the other. "You must find balance," Moira continued. "Let your bond with Vorian strengthen you, but don't let it define you. Learn your gifts, but don't let them corrupt you. Become powerful enough to protect what you love, but loving enough to wield that power wisely." Footsteps approached, Vorian, drawn by some instinct or maybe the pull of their bond. He appeared at the garden entrance, golden eyes finding Lyra immediately. The thread between them flared brilliant white. He saw Moira and stopped, bowing his head respectfully. "Elder, thank you for coming." "I came for her, not you," Moira said bluntly. "Though I suppose you're part of her now, whether she likes it or not." "I hope she likes it," Vorian said quietly, his gaze still on Lyra. "But I'll love her either way." The bond between them sang. Lyra felt it resonate in her chest, saw how it responded to his words by growing fractionally stronger. This was what Moira meant, power and love intertwined, each feeding the other. She stood on shaking legs and looked at the ancient seer. Teach me everything my parents would have taught me if they'd lived." Moira's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Now you sound like a moonweaver. Very well, your training begins at moonrise. And girl," she turned to leave, then glanced back. "Your parents died protecting you. Make their sacrifice mean something. Become what Cade fears most." As the seer disappeared into the fog that had brought her, Lyra felt the weight of inheritance settle across her shoulders. Not just power, responsibility, legacy. The chance to be what her bloodline had always been, a guardian of bonds, a protector of the broken, a balance against tyranny. She looked at Vorian standing in the garden entrance, at the bridge of light connecting them, and made her choice. She would learn, she would grow strong, and she would make Cade regret he hadn't killed her when he had the chance. Lyra found Vorian in his study, 3 hours, before the War Council was set to convene. Staring at maps he clearly wasn't seeing. The white-gold thread between them thrummed with tension, carrying emotions he was trying desperately to shield from her. "You're hiding something," she said from the doorway. His shoulders tensed. For a long moment, he didn't turn around. When he finally did, his golden eyes were haunted in a way she'd never seen before. "Yes," he admitted simply. "I have been since the moment you arrived." The thread between them flickered with something dark, guilt, maybe, or shame. Lyra stepped into the room and closed the door behind her. Whatever this was, it felt too raw for witnesses. "The seer said you've known about me since I was born," she said carefully. "That you felt the bond snap into place when I came into the world." "Yes," his voice was barely above a whisper. "She said you've been waiting for me to choose you, that taking me too soon would have killed me." Lyra moved closer, watching him track her movement like a drowning man watching a rescue boat. "But she didn't tell me everything, did she? There's more." Vorian's laugh was broken, jagged. "There's always more." He turned back to the window, gripping the sill hard enough that the wood creaked. "Do you know what an incomplete mate bond feels like, Lyra? For the one who's aware of it." She shook her head, though he couldn't see it. "It's a hook in your chest, pulling constantly toward someone you can't reach. It's knowing your other half exists but being forbidden to touch them." His knuckles went white. "And when that other half is in pain, gods, when they're suffering, you feel it. Not physically. Worse, you feel it in your soul." The air left Lyra's lungs in a rush. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've felt everything." The words came out raw, scraped from somewhere deep and terrible. "Every beating, every night you went hungry, every time your father made you feel worthless. 18 years of your pain bleeding through a bond you didn't even know existed, and I could do nothing but endure it." Lyra's mind reeled. You felt all of it. All of it? Vorian finally turned to face her, and the devastation in his eyes made her step back. The first time Cade struck you, you were 4 years old. You'd spilled water during dinner. I was in a council meeting 200 miles away when your terror hit me like a physical blow. I shifted involuntarily, destroyed half the room, and spent 3 days unable to speak because I kept feeling your sobs through the bond. Horror crawled up Lyra's spine. Why didn't you? Come for you? His smile was bitter. I tried. That night I rode for Silver Moon territory ready to burn it to ash and take you home. The seer found me 10 miles from the border and told me the truth. You were a moonweaver. Your power was already trying to manifest, but Cade's abuse was suppressing it. If I bonded with you before you were strong enough, before you'd chosen it freely, the power would overwhelm you, consume you from the inside until there was nothing left. He moved toward her, stopped when she tensed. She showed me visions of what would happen. You burning from the inside out as power you couldn't control tore through you. Dead before your 5th birthday because I couldn't wait. Couldn't be patient. So I made a choice, your temporary suffering over your permanent death. Lyra wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him for watching and doing nothing while she bled and starved and broke. But the pain in his voice, the absolute self-loathing, stopped her. Every wound, Vorian continued, his voice cracking. Every scar on your body, I have a matching one on my soul. When you were 9 and Cade's second broke your ribs, I felt them crack. I couldn't breathe for a week. My healers thought I was dying. They were right, I was, just slowly. Vorian. When you were 13 and you tried to run, and they caught you and beat you unconscious in the kennels. His voice broke completely. He pressed a hand to his chest like he could feel it even now. I felt you give up. Felt the moment you stopped fighting and just wanted it to end. I screamed for 3 days straight. Thorn had to chain me to keep me from tearing myself apart. Tears blurred Lyra's vision. She'd remembered that beating. Remembered deciding death would be easier than surviving. She'd never known someone was feeling it with her, dying alongside her from miles away. The night you walked into this forest, Vorian whispered, you wanted to die. I felt that too. Felt you give up, lie down in the snow, and wait for the end. And for the first time in 18 years, I could finally do something about it. Finally touch you, hold you, tell you that you mattered. His hands were shaking. I have been dying by inches since you were born, bleeding from wounds no one could see, and I could do nothing. Nothing. I'm an alpha king, and I was powerless to protect my own mate. The rage Lyra had been stoking guttered and died. This wasn't neglect or cowardice. This was sacrifice on a scale she couldn't comprehend. He'd endured 18 years of her agony, knowing he could end it by claiming her, but that doing so would kill her. You could have walked away, she said quietly. Rejected the bond, stopped feeling it. Never, the word was absolute. Rejecting the bond would have severed our connection completely. You would have lost any chance at your Moonweaver gifts, and I... He met her eyes finally, and what she saw there stole her breath. I would rather feel your pain every second for eternity than exist in a world where you weren't mine to protect, even from a distance, even if it destroyed me. Lyra crossed the space between them in 3 steps and reached up to cup his face in her hands. He froze, eyes wide, like he couldn't believe she was touching him willingly. I was trapped in that hell, she said, feeling the truth of it resonate through their bond. But you were trapped watching it, unable to save me. We were both prisoners, just in different cells. A sound escaped him, half sob, half laugh. His forehead dropped to rest against hers. I'm so sorry. I'm so goddamned sorry for every second you suffered. Stop, she threaded her fingers through his hair, holding him close. You made an impossible choice. You kept me alive, that's what matters. I should have found another way. There wasn't another way. Lyra pulled back enough to meet his eyes. Mora said power without love destroys. If you'd claimed me as a child, even out of love, I wouldn't have been able to choose you. The bond would have been forced, and I'd have become everything Cade wanted, a weapon without will. Understanding flickered across his face, followed by something fragile and desperate. Hope. But I can choose you now, Lyra continued. The white gold thread between them blazed brighter. I'm choosing you, Vorian. Not because fate decided it, not because you saved me, but because you loved me enough to let me be free, even when it was killing you. His hands came up to frame her face with devastating gentleness. "Are you sure? Once the bond completes, there's no undoing it. You'll be tied to me for the rest of our lives." "I know," she smiled through her tears. "I've spent 18 years with no choice about anything. This is the first real choice I've ever made, and I choose you." The kiss was nothing like the tentative exploration after the full moon. This was certainty, claiming, souls recognizing each other and crashing together like waves. Vorian's mouth moved against hers with barely restrained hunger. 18 years of longing finally allowed release. Lyra pulled him closer, desperate to erase any distance between them. When his hands slid into her hair, when his body pressed against hers, there was no fear, no flinching, just heat and want and the overwhelming rightness of being held by someone who would die before hurting her. The bond between them ignited. Lyra felt it complete, felt the bridge between their souls solidify into something unbreakable. Power flooded through her, moon-bright and devastating, but it didn't consume her. Vorian's presence anchored it, gave it shape and purpose. She gasped against his mouth and he caught her, lifting her easily and carrying her to the couch near the window. He laid her down with reverence, following her down to bracket her body with his. "Tell me if anything is too much," he murmured against her throat. "Tell me and I stop, always." Lyra's answer was to pull him closer, to trust him with her body the way she'd learned to trust him with her heart. Every touch was a question and an answer. Every kiss erased another scar from her soul. When his hands mapped her skin, they found only worship. No pain, no taking, just two people choosing each other against impossible odds. Later, wrapped in his arms with moonlight painting silver across their skin, Lyra felt the completed bond humming between them. Steady, strong, unbreakable. "I can feel you," she whispered in wonder. "Your emotions, your presence, like you're part of me now." "I've always been part of you," Vorian murmured into her hair. "You just couldn't feel me until now." His arms tightened. "I love you. I have loved you since the moment you existed, and I will love you until stars forget how to shine." Lyra turned in his embrace to face him. "Then, let's make Cade regret he ever touched either of us." Vorian's smile was fierce and protective and absolutely merciless. "Together." "Together," she agreed, and felt the bond flare brilliant white in response. For the first time in her life, Lyra understood what it meant to be whole. The convergence grounds were ancient, a massive clearing where 7 stone pillars marked the territories of the major packs. Once every decade, all alphas were required to gather here under the blood moon's light to settle disputes, forge alliances, and maintain the fragile peace between territories. Lyra had never seen so many wolves in one place. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, organized in distinct groups around their respective pillars. Banners flew in colors she didn't recognize. The air thrummed with barely contained aggression, alphas and their seconds sizing each other up like predators circling the same kill. "Stay close," Vorian murmured, his hand warm at the small of her back. He dressed her in deep forest green, the color of his territory, with silver embroidery that caught the fading light. The message was clear. She belonged to him, to the forbidden forest, and anyone who challenged that would face consequences. Thorn walked at Vorian's other side, his scarred face impassive, but his good eye constantly scanning for threats. Behind them, 20 of the Forbidden Forest's finest warriors maintained a protective formation. "The Northern Ridge Alpha is watching you," Thorn said quietly. "So is Crimson Veil. They're trying to figure out if the rumors are true." "Let them wonder," Vorian replied. His hand slipped to Lyra's waist, drawing her fractionally closer. The bond between them pulsed steady and strong. He was projecting calm, but she could feel the tension coiled beneath. He was expecting trouble. They were halfway to the Forbidden Forest's pillar when a commotion erupted near the eastern edge of the clearing. Wolves scattered, making way for a procession that moved with military precision. Silver Moonpack had arrived. Lyra's stomach dropped. She recognized the formation, Cade's personal guard, brutal wolves handpicked for their capacity for violence. They marched in tight ranks, and between them stumbled figures in chains. The hostages. Lyra's newly heightened senses cataloged everything in sharp detail. 15 wolves, just as Cade's messenger had promised. Men, women, children, all bound with silver chains that burned their skin where contact was made. Their faces were gaunt, eyes hollow. She recognized some of them. The baker's daughter who used to sneak her bread scraps, an elderly wolf who taught the young ones their history, a mother with 2 small children clinging to her legs. And at the front, barely visible between the guards, a little girl no older than 6. Dark hair matted with filth, bruises mottling pale skin. And eyes, gods, those eyes were the same ones Lyra had seen in mirrors for 18 years. Haunted, hopeless, already half dead inside. The completed bond must have sharpened her Moonweaver sight, because Lyra could see the threads connecting each hostage to their loved ones in the crowd. Fragile silver bonds stretched between the chained wolves and family members being held back by silver moon guards, threads quivering with terror and grief. Cade himself walked behind the hostages, and Lyra's entire body went rigid. He looked exactly as she remembered, scarred, muscular, with cold eyes that assessed everything like a merchant appraising inventory. When his gaze found her across the clearing, his smile was all teeth. Easy, Vorian breathed. His arm became steel around her waist, keeping her grounded. Through the bond, she felt him radiating lethal intent. He's trying to provoke you. Don't give him the satisfaction. Cade stopped at Silver Moon's pillar and raised one hand. His warriors forced the hostages to their knees. The little girl whimpered as rough hands shoved her down into the dirt. Brothers and sisters of the great packs, Cade's voice carried across the clearing, amplified by alpha authority. I come before you to report a theft. The king of the Forbidden Forest has stolen my daughter. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Lyra felt eyes turning toward her, assessing, judging. That's a lie, Vorian said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Lyra came to my territory of her own free will. She's my mate, acknowledged and bonded. She's a child who doesn't understand what she's choosing. Cade's tone was almost paternal, sickeningly concerned. She's been manipulated by tailies of the great Alpha King. I raised her from infancy. I know what's best for her. Lyra's fingernails bit into her palms. The urge to scream the truth, that he'd murdered her parents, that he was no father but a jailer, burned in her throat. But Vorian's hand tightened in warning. Not yet. If you truly cared for her well-being, Vorian said coldly, you wouldn't have sold her to a stranger for blood money. Gasps echoed through the clearing. Cade's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Lies, he said smoothly, though I'm not surprised. The Forest King is known for collecting strays and filling their heads with fantasies. He gestured to the hostages. These wolves, good, loyal members of my pack, have offered to accompany their alpha's daughter home, to help her see reason. The little girl's sob was audible even across the distance. Lyra's Moonweaver sight showed her the truth. Threads of silver connecting the child to 2 wolves being restrained at the edge of Silver Moon's formation. Parents, helpless to save their daughter. Hostages, you mean, Thorn growled. Concerned family, Cade corrected. Though I suppose if my daughter chooses to abandon her people, to let them suffer for her selfishness, that speaks to the quality of her character. It was a trap, a perfect, vicious trap. If Lyra went with him, she'd be used as a weapon to enslave every wolf here. If she stayed, Cade would make those hostages suffer publicly, would use their deaths to paint her as selfish and Vorian as a tyrant who valued one mate over 15 innocents. The convergence exists to settle disputes peacefully, the Northern Ridge Alpha spoke up. An older wolf with gray threading his black fur, he looked between Vorian and Cade with obvious reluctance to get involved. Surely we can find a compromise. There is no compromise with slavers, Vorian said flatly. Strong words from someone hiding behind the sanctuary accord. Cade's smile widened. These wolves left my territory willingly, following the one who abandoned them. No accord protects runaways who have broken pack law. More lies. The hostages were prisoners, not volunteers, but Cade had structured his story carefully, giving the other alphas room to stay neutral. to not risk their own packs in someone else's conflict. Lyra watched it happen in real time, alphas exchanging glances, stepping back, choosing politics over justice. The Crimson Veil alpha actually turned away, deliberately showing disinterest. Others followed his lead. Fear, they were afraid of Cade, of his willingness to do anything to win, afraid of war. And more than that, they were afraid of what Lyra represented. She could see it in the way they looked at her, the way whispers of Moonweaver and bloodline spread through the crowd. They'd let those hostages die, rather than stand against an alpha who'd already murdered one Moonweaver family. "No one's coming," Lyra said quietly, the realization settling like ice in her stomach. "I know," Vorian replied, equally quiet. Through the bond, she felt his fury and his calculation. He was already planning the rescue, mapping out how to extract the hostages by force. How many of his own wolves would die in the attempt? Cade pulled a blade from his belt, silver, gleaming wickedly in the blood moon's light. He walked to the little girl and grabbed her hair, yanking her head back to expose her throat. The child's parents screamed. Guards held them back. "I'm a reasonable man," Cade said conversationally, as if he wasn't holding a knife to a 6-year-old's throat. "I'll make this simple. Lyra returns with me willingly before the moon reaches its peak, or I start reducing my numbers. 1 hostage per hour until she sees sense, or I run out of leverage." The blade pressed lightly against fragile skin. "Starting with the youngest. Children break so easily, don't they?" The little girl's eyes found Lyra across the clearing. In that gaze, Lyra saw herself, saw every moment she'd spent hopping someone, anyone, would save her. Saw the exact instant hope died and resignation took its place. No one would save her. No one ever saved the weak, the small, the expendable. Except Lyra stepped forward, away from Vorian's protective arm. Her Moonweaver sight flared and she saw them. Every bond in the clearing, hundreds of threads connecting wolves to their mates, their family, their pack. Saw how some threads were healthy and bright while others were twisted, corrupted by forced loyalty or fear. And she saw Cade's threads. Dozens of them, sickly gray, connecting him to wolves throughout the clearing. Not love or loyalty, these were threads of control. Wolves he'd blackmailed, threatened, or bought. His network of power laid bare before her enhanced vision. "What are you doing?" Vorian asked, tension radiating through their bond. Lyra looked at her mate, this king who'd suffered for 18 years to keep her safe, who'd given her choice and freedom and love. "Becoming what Cade fears most," she said. Then she raised her voice to carry across the entire convergence. "I'll make you a counteroffer, Alpha Cade. Release the hostages unharmed, and I'll let you keep your corrupted bonds. Keep them, and I'll show everyone here exactly what you are." Her hands began to glow silver-white. The little girl stumbled when a guard shoved her forward, and Lyra was 9 years old again. She remembered the feeling, knees hitting stone, palms scraping, the shame of being too weak to stay upright, the laughter that always followed. "Clumsy runt, can't even walk properly." In the present, Cade's guard grabbed the child by the arm, yanking her back to her feet hard enough to dislocate something. The girl's cry of pain was small, swallowed quickly. She'd learned young that screaming made it worse. Lyra had learned that lesson at 7, when she'd wailed after her father. No, not her father, never her father, had broken her fingers for dropping a serving tray. He'd broken another finger for the noise, and she'd learned to cry silently after that. Tears that slid down her face in the dark where no one could see them, where they couldn't be used as evidence of weakness. The child's face was a map of Lyra's past. Bruises in various stages of healing, yellow-green old ones, purple-black fresh ones. The kind of pattern that spoke to regular, systematic cruelty. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. Someone had hit her recently, hard enough to leave an imprint. Lyra was 11, cowering in the kennels while her father's second circled her with a riding crop. "This is for your own good," he'd said, each word punctuated with a strike. "You need to learn your place." She'd counted the blows, 23 before he'd gotten bored and left. She'd counted because focusing on numbers kept her from screaming, from giving him the satisfaction. "Please," the little girl whispered now, the word barely audible. Not begging for freedom, she was too broken for that, just begging for it to hurt less, for it to be over faster. Through her moonweaver sight, Lyra watched the child's threads quivering with terror, saw how the bond to her parents was straining, stretched thin by distance and fear, saw smaller threads connecting the girl to the other hostages, children who'd formed bonds of survival, clinging to each other in the dark. Just like Lyra had done, at 13, when Cade had locked her in the old granary with 2 other defective wolves for 3 days without food. They'd huddled together for warmth, sharing whispered stories to keep the darkness at bay. One had been a boy with a twisted leg who'd been deemed useless for hunting. The other, a girl whose wolf had never manifested. Cade had sold them both within the month. Lyra never learned what happened to them, but she could guess. No one bought broken wolves for kind purposes. Lyra, Vorian's voice cut through the memories. His hand found hers, grounding her in the present. I can see you slipping away. Come back. She turned to look at him, this powerful king who'd somehow learned to love a shattered thing. Through their bond, she felt his concern bleeding into fear. He knew what she was thinking, could feel the determination crystallizing in her chest. I have to go to him, she said quietly. No, the word was immediate, absolute. We'll find another way. There is no other way. Lyra gestured toward the hostages with her free hand. You see them? I was them. Every single one. I know exactly what they're feeling right now. The terror, the hopelessness, the certainty that no one's coming to save them because no one ever does. Vorian's grip tightened. Then we save them together. Attack now, overwhelming force. And how many die in the crossfire? She met his golden eyes steadily. Cade will kill them the moment you move. You know he will. He'll slit that little girl's throat just to make a point, and her parents will feel it through their bond and they'll break. That's what he does. He breaks people. A memory surfaced, sharp and vicious. Lyra was 15. A young couple had tried to run from Silver Moon territory. Cade's hunters brought them back and made the entire pack watch while he forced the male to choose. Watch his mate die or kill her himself and prove his loyalty. The male had refused both, had fought until Cade's guards beat him unconscious. Then Cade had killed the female slowly, methodically, while her mate was held with his eyes forced open. The male had never recovered. Last Lyra had seen him, he was a hollow shell, speaking to a ghost only he could see. I survived 18 years of that, Lyra said. I survived so I could be here right now for this moment, so I could save them the way no one saved me. By sacrificing yourself, Vorian's voice was raw, by walking into his trap. By using what I am. Silver light flickered across Lyra's palms. I'm a moonweaver. I can see his corrupted bonds, all the wolves he controls through fear and blackmail. If I get close enough, I can sever those bonds. Free his entire pack from his influence in one moment. She pulled up her moonweaver sight again, showing Vorian what she saw. Cade's web of control, gray threads stretching to wolves throughout his pack, binding them through threats against their families, their mates, their children. Each thread was a chain, and Lyra could break every single one. And then what? Vorian demanded. He kills you before I can reach you. Maybe, Lyra cupped his face in her hands. Or maybe I'm faster than he expects. Maybe I break his control and his own pack turns on him. Maybe I buy enough time for you to save the hostages. This is insane. This is the only choice that doesn't result in dead children. Her voice cracked. I can't watch another child die because I was too afraid to act. I won't become another person who looked away because it was safer. Vorian pulled her against his chest, his arms bands of steel around her. She felt his heart hammering against her cheek, felt the bond between them screaming in protest at what she was suggesting. There has to be another way, he whispered into her hair. Something that doesn't require you walking into hell. I've lived in hell, Lyra said. I know how to survive it, and this time I won't be alone. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. You'll come for me, I know you will. I just need to stay alive long enough for you to reach me. And if you can't? The question hung between them, heavy with terrible possibility. Lyra thought about the little girl with her father's eyes, thought about all the children she'd seen broken by Cade's cruelty, thought about the person she'd been, convinced she was worthless, that her suffering didn't matter, that she was born to be a victim. Then save them anyway, she said firmly. Promise me, Vorian, if this goes wrong, if I don't make it, promise you'll get the hostages out, especially the children. Promise me my death will matter. Don't, his voice broke. Don't talk like that. Promise me. He stared at her for a long moment, and she watched something shift in his expression. The understanding that he couldn't protect her from this, that she was choosing to walk into danger, and he had to let her because the alternative was living with dead children haunting their bond forever. I promise, he finally said, but you promise me something too. Promise you'll fight. Promise you'll survive long enough for me to reach you. Promise me. His voice cracked completely. Promise me I don't lose you after finally finding you. Lyra rose onto her toes and kissed him, poured everything she felt through the bond, love and gratitude and determination and fear. When she pulled back, tears were streaming down her face. I love you, she said, and the words felt monumental. She'd never said them before, never understood what they meant. Love wasn't just feeling safe or cared for. Love was being willing to walk into fire so the person you loved wouldn't have to carry the weight of preventable deaths. I love you, and I finally understand what that means. It means I'd die to keep you from having to. Vorian's composure shattered. He kissed her desperately, one hand fisting in her hair, the other crushing her against him like he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. The bond between them blazed white gold, so bright it hurt. When they finally broke apart, his golden eyes were wet. You come back to me, he ordered, every ounce of alpha command in his voice. You use your power, you survive, and you come back to me. That's not a request. That's a king's decree. Lyra smiled through her tears. Yes, my king. She turned toward where Cade waited, silver light already gathering in her palms. Behind her, she felt Vorian shifting his warriors into position, preparing for the moment she'd give the signal. Felt Thorn's grim determination and Sage's whispered prayer. And ahead, she saw the little girl watching her with those haunted, hopeless eyes. Saw the exact moment hope flickered, small and fragile but real, when the child recognized that someone was coming. Lyra had spent 18 years believing no one would save her, had internalized every lesson about worthlessness and expendability. But she'd survived, and she'd learned she mattered. Now it was time to prove that everyone else mattered too. She walked toward Cade with her head high, silver light dancing across her skin, and felt the girl she'd been walking beside her. Not a ghost, but a promise. This ends tonight. Lyra crossed the clearing with measured steps, each one bringing her closer to the monster who'd stolen her childhood. Silver light rippled across her skin like moonlight on water, and she let it show. Let everyone see what a moonweaver looked like when she stopped hiding. Cade's smile widened as she approached, but she could see the calculation behind it. He was already planning how to break her, how to twist her power to his purposes. He had no idea what was coming. There's my daughter, he said, loud enough for the gathered alphas to hear. Come home at last. I'm not your daughter. Lyra stopped 10 feet away, just outside his reach. I'm the child of wolves you murdered, the moonweaver you tried to destroy. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cade's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on the blade still pressed to the little girl's throat. Careful, he said softly. One wrong word and this child dies. No, Lyra's voice was steady, certain. She doesn't, because you need me compliant, and killing her guarantees Vorian tears you apart. You're not here to execute hostages, you're here to control me. She took another step forward, and this time she let her moonweaver sight flare to full strength. The threads connecting Cade to his corrupted pack blazed into visibility, dozens of gray bonds pulsing with fear and coercion. I can see them, she said. Every wolf you've blackmailed, every bond you've twisted, every life you've destroyed to build your power. Cade's smile finally faltered. You're bluffing. Am I? Lyra raised her hands and silver light gathered in her palms, bright enough to cast shadows. Shall we test it? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Cade's face. He'd expected a broken girl, easily cowed. Instead, he was facing a moonweaver in her power, backed by an alpha king who would burn the world for her. "Release the hostages," Lyra said. "Release them, leave this convergence, and I won't expose every terrible thing you've done. I won't show these alphas how you've corrupted the sacred bonds. I won't unravel your entire network of control." "And if I refuse?" Lyra smiled, and it was all teeth. "Then I do it anyway, and you lose everything." She reached out with her power, grasping the nearest corrupted thread, a bond connecting Cade to one of his guards. The thread thrummed under her touch, sick and twisted. With a thought, she severed it. The guard gasped, stumbling backward. Freedom and confusion warred across his face as Cade's influence snapped like a broken chain. "No," Cade started, but Lyra was already moving. She grabbed another thread and cut it, then another. Silver light blazed from her hands as she worked, severing bond after bond, freeing wolves from years of coercion. It was like untangling a massive web, and with each cut, Cade's power fractured. "Stop her," Cade screamed at his guards, but they were the ones being freed. One by one, they stepped back, blinking like wolves waking from nightmares. In desperation, Cade moved. His blade left the little girl's throat and he lunged, not at Lyra, but at the child. If he couldn't control the Moonweaver, he'd make her watch him destroy what she was trying to save. Lyra saw it happening in slow motion. Saw the poisoned blade, because of course it was poisoned. Cade never fought fair, arcing toward the child's heart. Saw the girl's parents screaming, fighting their restraints. She didn't think, just moved. Lyra threw herself between the blade and the child, and white-hot pain exploded across her ribs. The poisoned steel bit deep, and immediately her veins turned black as venom spread from the wound. "Lyra!" Vorian's roar shook the clearing. She felt him through the bond, felt his absolute terror, his rage, felt the exact moment he shifted and charged. The Forbidden Forest's warriors exploded into motion behind their king, but something else moved too. The ground beneath Lyra's feet trembled. Trees at the edge of the clearing began to glow with the same silver light that poured from her hands. Ancient magic, older than any wolf, recognized what she was, recognized what she'd done. The Moonweaver had sacrificed herself for a child, had chosen love over survival, and the forest remembered when such choices had kept balance in the world. Roots erupted from the earth, massive and unstoppable. They wrapped around Cade's legs, his arms, dragging him down. He screamed, fighting against them, but the forest was merciless. The trees remembered what he'd done to Moonweavers, remembered the family he'd slaughtered. "The forest judges you," Lyra gasped, blood trickling from her mouth, "and finds you wanting." Cade was pulled into the earth itself, his screams cutting off abruptly as ancient roots claimed him. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of Vorian's massive wolf form skidding to a stop beside Lyra's crumpled body. He shifted back to human, gathering her against his chest. "No, no, no, Lyra, stay with me." The poison was spreading fast. Lyra could feel her heart slowing, her vision dimming. But through the haze, she saw the hostages, saw the little girl staring at her with wide eyes, saw the threads connecting the children to their parents starting to heal now that Cade's influence was gone. She had just enough strength left, just enough power. Lyra reached out with her Moonweaver gift one last time, found the broken bonds of every hostage child, every wolf who'd been damaged by Cade's cruelty. She poured her remaining light into those threads, mending them, strengthening them, giving them a chance to find real love and real family. The act should have killed her, should have drained the last of her life force. But Moonweaver magic responded to sacrifice, to selfless love. As Lyra's power flowed into the children's broken bonds, something flowed back ancient, warm, grateful. The forest's magic, the moon's blessing, the collective strength of every bond she'd healed. Silver light exploded from her chest, driving back the poison. Her wound began to close, flesh knitting together with impossible speed. The venom retreated, unable to exist in the presence of such pure, concentrated love. Vorian watched in stunned silence as color returned to her face, as her heartbeat strengthened beneath his palm. Lyra. She opened her eyes, silver bright, glowing with power. I'm okay, she whispered. I'm okay. He crushed her against him, a sob tearing from his throat. Through their bond, she felt his relief, his love, his absolute conviction that he would never let her be in danger again. Around them, the convergence erupted in chaos. The hostages were being freed from their chains, parents reuniting with children, freed wolves turning on Cade's remaining loyalists. The other alphas backed away, uncertain how to respond to what they'd just witnessed. Lyra looked up at the blood moon, hanging overhead, and smiled. She'd survived. They'd all survived. And Cade was gone. 6 months later, Lyra stood at the forest's edge watching the sun set. Behind her, the fortress, no, the sanctuary, hummed with life. Wolves trained in the yard, children played tag between the great trees, and smoke from cooking fires carried the scent of dinner on the evening air. They'd opened the borders completely. Any wolf fleeing abuse, any pack outcast, any defective or worthless or broken soul could find refuge here. The population had tripled, and every week brought new arrivals. Vorian appeared at her side, sliding an arm around her waist. The Northern Ridge Alpha sent another message. They want to establish a formal alliance. Because they're afraid we'll expose their own corrupted bonds, Lyra said dryly. Probably, but I'll take motivated allies over no allies. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You've changed the world, my queen. The other packs are scrambling to clean up their acts before you turn your attention their way. Lyra leaned into him, feeling the bond between them pulse steady and strong. They'd been formally mated in a ceremony that drew wolves from every territory, binding not just their souls but their political futures. She was queen of the Forbidden Forest now, and that title carried weight. Movement at the tree line caught her eye. A figure emerged from the shadows, small, limping, desperate. A girl, maybe 14, with matted hair and eyes that had seen too much. Blood stained her torn clothes, and silver burns marked her wrists where chains had been. Lyra knew that look, had worn it herself not so long ago. She pulled away from Vorian and walked toward the girl, moving slowly so as not to frighten her. When she was close enough, Lyra unfastened the warm cloak from her shoulders, the same one Vorian had given her that first night, and wrapped it around the trembling girl. You're safe now, Lyra said gently, the words Vorian had once spoken to her. You're home. The girl stared at her, disbelief and desperate hope warring in her expression. I heard stories about a queen who saves broken wolves, about a sanctuary where no one hurts you. The stories are true. Lyra smiled and offered her hand. Come, let's get you fed and warm. Tomorrow we can start healing. As she led the girl toward the fortress, Lyra glanced back at the forest. In the fatting light, she could see dozens of wolves going about their evening routines, training, laughing, simply existing without fear. She saw the little girl she'd saved at the convergence playing with a group of pups, her bruises long healed, her smile genuine. Saw Thorn teaching combat to a class of former victims who were learning to be warriors. Saw Say tending to new arrivals with gentle, patient hands. This was what she'd survived for, not just to escape her own hell, but to build a heaven for everyone else still trapped in theirs. Vorian caught up to her, resting his hand on the small of her back. Through their bond, she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that this, the sanctuary, their pack, their purpose, was exactly what they were meant to create together. Another one saved, he murmured. Another one home, Lyra corrected. Above them, the moon rose full and bright, bathing the sanctuary in silver light. And in that light, Lyra wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, she was powerful, she was loved. She was finally, truly home. If Lyra's story reached into your chest and grabbed hold of something tender, you're not alone. This story isn't just about wolves and magic. It's about every person who's ever felt worthless, every soul who's been told they don't matter, every heart that's learned to make itself small just to survive. It's about the moment you realize that the voice telling you you're broken was lying. That survival itself is a form of strength, that you were never the problem. Lyra walked into those woods wanting to die, and she walked out choosing to live. That transformation, from believing you're worthless to understanding you're irreplaceable, is the most powerful magic any of us will ever experience. Subscribe now because you deserve stories that see you, that honor your survival, that celebrate your strength, the one where you're not the victim anymore, but the hero. Click subscribe now, and I will see you in my next story.